Driving for Uber seems like a decent gig most days. You log in, pick up a couple of rides, listen to some podcasts, maybe even chat with a few passengers if they're feeling friendly. Nothing too crazy. But one night, one ride changed everything I thought I knew about the job. This wasn't just a weird passenger or a bad tip. This was something else. Something sinister. And to this day, I still don't understand exactly what I let into my car. It all started on a rainy Friday night in late October. Of course, right? Halloween weekend. I was doing the late-night shift, trying to rack up some surge fare pickups around downtown. College bars, clubs, house parties, lots of people needing rides, and lots of drunk people forgetting to check the license plate before hopping in. I got a ping around 12:40 a.m. A guy named Dan Pickup was on a quiet residential street not too far from an old park on the outskirts of the city. Not unusual for that time of night, especially with people walking to avoid drunk driving. The thing is, when I pulled up, the street was pitch black. No porch lights, no sounds. Just the rain tapping against the windshield and my wipers dragging across the glass. And then I saw him. He was standing beneath a street lamp that flickered like something out of a bad horror movie. Tall, wearing a long black coat, drenched from the rain, and holding something. I thought maybe a bag or a case, but he didn't wave. He didn't move. He just stared straight at my car. I almost didn't roll down the window. There was something off about him. But the app confirmed the name, confirmed the location, and as far as I could tell, it was just a creepy-looking guy needing a ride. I forced a smile, unlocked the door, and he got in. That was my first mistake. He slid into the back seat slowly, like he didn't want to get the interior wet. I appreciated the courtesy, but something about his movements was deliberate, like each motion was being studied, calculated. He shut the door, folded his hands in his lap, and stared forward through the windshield. "Dan?" I asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. He nodded once. No smile, no small talk, just that one single nod. "All right, looks like we're headed up north, off old Highway 17, I said, trying to fill the silence with something. "Anything." "Correct?" he replied, his voice dry and flat, almost rehearsed. I couldn't place the accent. Maybe Midwest? Southern? It was faint but wrong somehow, like he was imitating what an average guy was supposed to sound like. I shrugged it off and pulled away from the curb. The rain was getting worse. Big, heavy drops that splashed and smeared across the windshield. I turned up the wipers. The road was mostly empty, bordered by tall, swaying trees. No streetlights out there, just black sky and the occasional lightning flash. We drove in silence for a while. Not unusual, but this was a heavy kind of silence. Claustrophobic. I fiddled with the radio, put on some soft jazz to ease the tension. It helped. A little. Then I saw it again. His eyes, watching me in the rearview mirror. He didn't look away. He wasn't embarrassed to be caught staring. He just met my eyes like he'd been waiting for me to notice. "Everything all right back there?" I said with a forced chuckle. No response. He slowly turned his gaze back to the road. I noticed then that he hadn't blinked once since getting in. Not a single time. I swallowed hard. "So, Dan, you headed home? Visiting someone?" Still nothing. The jazz was starting to feel eerie now, like it was playing too slow. I reached out to change the station, and that's when he spoke again. "You've driven this way before." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, firm and strange. I blinked. Yeah, once or twice. Sometimes folks stay out at the cabins near the reservoir." Dan nodded. Slowly, thoughtfully. "They never came back, did they?" My hand froze on the volume knob. "What did you say?" He didn't answer. Just looked out the window as the rain pelted the glass harder than ever. My pulse was picking up. Something was wrong. Something was deeply wrong. The GPS said we were 20 minutes from the drop-off location. 20 long, dark minutes. I thought about ending the ride, making up an excuse, saying the car was having issues. But I was too afraid. Not of getting a bad rating. I was afraid of him, because for the first time in my life I didn't feel like I had a passenger. I felt like I had a predator in my back seat. 10 minutes from the drop-off, something strange happened. My phone buzzed with a sharp vibration, an alert from the Uber app. I glanced down quickly. My heart sank. Passenger has canceled the ride. What? That didn't make sense. We were still on the road. Dan was still in the car. Cleared my throat. Hey, looks like the trip got canceled. Did you mean to do that? Dan didn't respond. He didn't even move. We're still going to the same address, right? I added, uneasy. He leaned forward, close enough that I could feel his breath against my neck. We're almost there, he whispered. The hairs on my arms stood up. I slammed the brakes harder than I should have. The tires skidded slightly on the wet pavement. Dan eased back into his seat without a word. I wanted to leave him right there, tell him to get out, drive off, and never look back. But something told me he wouldn't go even if I asked. Or worse, he might not let me go if I tried. I gripped the steering wheel tight and continued driving. The road narrowed. Trees leaned over from either side, their branches clawing at the roof like skeletal fingers. The GPS updated. Arriving at destination in 0.3 miles. I slowed to a crawl. There was no house, no driveway, just a narrow dirt path barely wide enough for my car. It was overgrown, almost hidden. You can turn here, Dan said, suddenly sounding very clear, almost pleasant. I hesitated. This doesn't look like a road, I said. Dan's voice turned cold again. Turn. My hands moved on their own. I don't know why. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was something deeper. Something unnatural. The wheels crunched over gravel and dead leaves as I turned into the path. The woods swallowed us whole. Branches scraped along both sides of the car. My headlights barely pierced the thick mist that seemed to rise from the earth itself. My heart thundered in my chest. My knuckles were white from gripping the wheel. Dan began to hum. Low, deep, that same eerie, tuneless hum from before. It didn't sound like a song. It sounded like a warning, or a ritual. And still I drove. The path opened suddenly into a clearing. I hadn't seen it on the GPS. There was no map marker, no address. Just empty space surrounded by trees so tall and dark they felt ancient. In the center was a structure. A small, rotting cabin with a collapsed porch and windows like black holes. Dan spoke again. You can stop here. I did. I didn't want to. Every part of my brain screamed to turn the car around and floor it back to the highway. But my foot hit the brake like it was obeying someone else. Dan opened the door slowly, water sloshing under his shoes as he stepped into the mud. But he didn't leave. He walked around the front of the car, keeping his face just out of the headlights. Then he knocked. On the hood. Once, twice, 3 times. A long silence followed. Then the front door of the cabin creaked open on its own. And I swear to you, I swear on everything, I saw something move inside. Not a person. Not an animal. A shape, crawling backward into the dark like it had been watching us from the edge of the doorway. Dan turned toward me. You should come inside. My mouth went dry. No, I think I'll wait in the car. His head tilted. Slowly. You invited me. You're part of this now. No, I said, heart pounding. The ride's over. Dan took a step toward the driver's side window. Rainwater streamed off his coat. He leaned down inches from the glass and smiled. His mouth was too wide, too full of teeth. Not human teeth. Thin and long, like needles arranged in a perfect row. The smile didn't reach his eyes. Those stayed pitch black. Some rides don't end, he whispered. Then he vanished. I don't mean he walked away. I mean he vanished. One blink and he was gone. No sound. No splash. No figure in the dark. Just rain. And the sound of my own panic breathing. That's when the knocking started again. Not on the hood. From the inside of the car. The sound came from directly behind me. 3 knocks. Deliberate. Heavy. As if someone or something was reminding me they were still there. Inside. I whipped around. The back seat was empty. But the knocking continued. Couldn't breathe. My fingers scrambled for the door handle. I flung the driver's side door open and stumbled out into the rain, slipping in the mud and falling hard. My elbow slammed into the ground, but I didn't feel the pain. All I could think about was getting away from the car. I backed up slowly. The headlights illuminated the driver's seat, the passenger seat, the dashboard, all empty. Then the interior lights flickered. Just once. And that's when I saw it, just for a second. A face in the rearview mirror. Not Dan's. Something older. Wrinkled and ashen, with eyes too wide and skin stretched tight across a skull that didn't quite look human. The face grinned before vanishing in a blur of static like flickering, like an old television losing signal. The car went dark. I turned and ran toward the woods. I didn't care where I was going. I didn't care about the cabin. I just needed to get away from whatever had entered my car. Branches whipped across my face as I pushed through underbrush and ferns. My shoes filled with freezing rainwater. Somewhere behind me, the knocking resumed, louder, faster, following me through the trees. I thought I could hear footsteps behind me, but they weren't quite footsteps. They were too rhythmic, too steady, like the sound of something crawling upright, dragging itself through the forest. I didn't look back. Eventually, I stumbled into a small ravine and collapsed under an outcropping of mossy stone. My breath was shallow. My heart felt like it was about to explode. Everything went silent again. I don't know how long I lay there. The woods were heavy with fog, and even the rain seemed quieter here, like the sound had been muffled. My body shook uncontrollably from cold and fear. That's when I heard the humming again. Not from behind me, not from the car. From within the forest itself. It was everywhere. A chorus of that same low, tuneless hum, coming from every direction. The humming grew louder, layered, multiplied, as though dozens, maybe hundreds, of voices were joining in. But I still couldn't see anything. The forest was thick with mist and shadows. Every branch seemed to twist in unnatural ways. The trees looked taller now, like they were stretching upward into an endless night sky. Then the whispering began. Soft, subtle, like wind through dead leaves. But it was language, words I couldn't understand, spoken in a tongue that didn't belong in this world. My skin prickled. My body froze. In the mist ahead, shapes began to form. Not human, not quite. Tall figures, thin and elongated, with limbs that bent the wrong way. Their faces were veiled in shadow, but I could see the glint of eyes. Dozens of eyes, unblinking, watching. One of them moved. It didn't walk. It drifted, like it was carried by the mist itself. As it came closer, I saw its feet never touched the ground. Return, it whispered. I couldn't speak. My throat was locked tight. My legs were numb. The figure reached a long hand toward me. Its fingers stretched, tipped with blackened nails. Return what you brought. I didn't know what it meant. I hadn't brought anything. I just gave a guy a ride. That's all I did. But that wasn't all, was it? I invited him in. Another voice echoed through the forest. This one was familiar. Dan, you didn't finish the ride, he said. And suddenly he was there, standing next to the figure. Only now he looked different.
Taller.
Paler. His eyes were all black, and his mouth stretched from ear to ear. That needle smile again. You left me, he said, stepping forward. You don't get to leave me. The watchers in the trees began to chant. The humming shifted, growing faster, more chaotic, like a storm of sound surrounding me. I turned and ran. Branches whipped my face. My lungs burned, but I kept running. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get back to the car, to the real world, if it was still there. I burst from the tree line into the clearing. The car was still there, covered in leaves, fogged up windows, headlights dim but flickering. It looked like it had been sitting there for years, abandoned to the elements. But I didn't care. I sprinted toward it, yanked open the door, and dove inside. I slammed the lock button and turned the key in the ignition. Nothing. No sound. No lights. The engine was dead. The humming had stopped, but now the forest was completely silent. No rain. No wind. Just an eerie, unnatural stillness. I sat frozen for a moment, then slowly turned to look into the back seat. It wasn't empty. The figure was there. Not Dan. Not any kind of person I recognized. It looked like it was made of ash and shadows, hunched and folded into itself. Its skin was gray and cracked, its eyes small and silver, reflecting my own terrified face. I couldn't move. Then it opened its mouth. Not to speak, but to scream. The sound that came out shattered something in my mind. It was pure, primal fear. Not loud, but sharp. A scream not made for human ears. The windows of the car spiderwebbed with cracks. I scrambled out, fell into the mud, and crawled until I couldn't hear it anymore. And then I saw him again. Dan stood at the edge of the clearing, hands behind his back, head tilted slightly. "You brought it back," he said. "Good. What the hell is going on?" I shouted, my voice hoarse. "What are you? What is that thing?" Dan stepped forward slowly. "We're all passengers," he said. "But some of us remember where we're going." He pointed behind me. I turned, expecting to see the creature. But the car was empty again. No damage, no ash, just the quiet purr of the engine, running like it had never stalled. My phone buzzed. One new notification. Ride in progress. Estimated time. Unknown. I got back in the car, hands trembling on the steering wheel. Dan was gone again. The clearing empty. The only thing left was the open dirt path ahead, now bathed in an eerie white light that didn't come from my headlights. It seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, guiding me deeper into the forest. But I didn't have a choice. I shifted the car into drive and followed it. The forest changed as I drove. The trees grew thinner and darker. The air grew colder. My breath fogged up the windshield. The radio crackled and hissed even though I hadn't turned it on. Then it spoke. My voice, screaming, crying, begging for help. The car filled with 100 overlapping versions of me. Every fear, every pain, every secret I'd never told anyone, all played back at once. I slammed the radio off, but the sound didn't stop. It was coming from inside my head. And then, silence. The road widened. Up ahead was another clearing, but this one was different. Clean, paved, brightly lit like a parking lot. And in the center of it, an Uber sign. A literal, glowing sign. Beneath it stood Dan, waiting. I parked and stepped out, unsure if I was dreaming or dying or something in between. Dan gestured to a bench beside him. "Sit." I didn't move. "Why me?" I asked. "Why any of this?" Dan looked up. For the first time, he seemed almost sad. "Because you looked. You saw me. Most people don't." I shook my head. "I just gave you a ride." He nodded. "And I just gave you a destination." "What destination?" He stepped closer, leaned in. "The one you've been driving toward your whole life." And then he held up his phone. On it, a map. My home. The entire route tracked. Every ride I'd ever given. Every turn. Every second logged. And the app said, "You've arrived." I backed away from Dan. "This isn't real," I muttered. "None of this is real." But everything around me felt real. Too real. The cold. The smell of the earth. The weight in my chest. Dan didn't move. He just kept staring with those bottomless eyes. Then he said something that froze me to my core. "You've already given the ride. This is just the receipt." Behind him, I saw shapes gathering again. Those twisted, hollow things I'd seen in the forest. The Watchers. Only now I could see their faces more clearly. They weren't strangers. They were passengers. Every ride I'd ever given. Every face I'd forgotten. Some smiling. Some silent. All dead. "You gave them a lift," Dan said. "They gave you a little piece of themselves. And now they want their fare." I shook my head violently. "I didn't do anything. I didn't know." "But you do now." One of the shapes stepped forward. A woman I vaguely remembered from years ago. A ride late at night. She had cried silently in my back seat the whole trip. I hadn't asked why. Now her eyes were hollow sockets, and her mouth opened into a scream I couldn't hear but felt in my bones. She reached for me. I turned and ran for the car again. Slammed the door. Locked it. Started the engine. I threw it into reverse and tore back down the path. The trees flew past in a blur. The radio screamed. The windshield fogged over with handprints. But I didn't stop. Not until I saw the edge of the woods again. I burst out of the forest like breaking the surface of water, the car slamming back onto the gravel road with a spine-rattling thud. The lights of the highway were up ahead. Civilization. Normalcy. I didn't look back. Not at the path. Not at the shapes. Not at Dan. But in the rearview mirror, I saw the meter still running. And I saw one word printed across the screen. Ode. I made it back to the city. I parked my car in front of my apartment, killed the engine, and sat in silence for a long time. The street was quiet. The rain had stopped. The world looked normal again. But I wasn't. I hadn't slept in almost 2 days. I hadn't eaten. Every sound made me jump. I kept checking the back seat even though I knew it was empty. I tried deleting the Uber app. Came back. I tried smashing my phone. The next day it was on my kitchen counter. Intact. I even burned the car. But 1 week later it was back in my driveway. Same plates. Same scratches on the dashboard. Inside, the phone still sat on the mount. Waiting. I went online. Looked for help. Forums. Groups. Stories. And I found them. Not many. But enough. People like me. Drivers. Passengers. People who gave a ride to someone or something they shouldn't have. They called it the passenger. Not a ghost. Not a demon. Something older. Something that uses the way we move, the way we travel, to slip into our lives. It needs an invitation, yes. But not a spoken one. Just a ride. A door unlocked. A tap on a screen. And once it's in, it doesn't leave. It follows. Rides along with you in every trip. Every mile. And one day, when you least expect it, it finishes the route. I don't know when that'll be for me. I've stopped driving. I stay inside. I keep the lights on. But sometimes late at night I hear it. That humming. And I know the ride isn't over. Not yet. But someday soon the app will update. The meter will stop. And the screen will say what it's always meant to. You have reached your final destination.